Aloha everyone, and welcome to another Tinker's Academy video. I'm your host Kielmer, and in this video I'd like to share with you my take on DIY wound healing, and specifically a case study of a recent dog bite, a pretty serious one that my daughter had on her hand, and how we went about healing her wound without the intervention of visits to the ER, physicians, or antibiotics, and that sort of thing. And so, just to show that it's completely possible to do so without having to risk your gut microbiome with antibiotics and or incurring all of the discomforts of having to deal with the modern healthcare system. So, before I get into that case study, and if this is for you, if you're interested in that sort of thing, being self-sufficient and being prepared for it, I want to just do a little disclaimer that this is not medical advice. This is my story, our story. And I also want to really strongly caution everybody. When it comes to dog bites, if there's any concern at all that the dog that bit someone or bit you could have had rabies, then that person needs to get a rabies vaccine series immediately. Okay, the vaccines can prevent rabies, but otherwise getting rabies is almost a certain death for you if the dog has it. And so luckily in most situations, people will know the dog that bit them. Then they will know whether the dog was vaccinated or not. Legally, the dog would have to be quarantined for a couple of weeks. In the case of my daughter, the dog was known. The dog had been vaccinated, and so she was just, we treated her wound as a typical wound. Otherwise, she would have had to go get the rabies shots. And so now if it's a loose animal and you don't know the dog, you can't find the owner. And that has happened to me, and it just happened to a friend of mine just last week, where he got bit riding his bicycle, and he's undergoing rabies shots right now because he can't find the dog. But usually animal control will try to find the animal. They usually get put down if they have rabies, it's kind of a brutal process. But the bottom line, though, is it's a very serious issue when you get bit by an animal for the fact of the issue with rabies. Okay, so take that very seriously. But in this case, I want to caveat that we chose as two adults. My daughter is an adult to undergo DIY, a self-treatment. And instead of going to a modern medicine, practice process, okay? And then so our process here, and I just, before I, get into what we did and how do you do it, is, trying to understand, why even do it yourself anyway. So, first of all, where there's no doctor, okay, so there's a lot of situations where, this is actually really good information to have if you're somewhere where there's just no doctor. And I was raised by two very self-sufficient individuals who were raised in environments where their doctors were just not available. Father grew up on a farm. My mother grew up in World War II and post-World War II Taiwan, and so in these environments, just medical care was just not available. Also, my father was an avid outdoorsman. I spent literally half of my entire childhood in the woods or on a boat, and as things happened, and they always do, and I can tell you a countless number of times, my sister and I got injured or something happened, we just took care of ourselves. Our parents took care of us. I learned from them. Also a lifelong scout, and the motto of the Boy Scouts is always be prepared, and that kind of morphed into being a preparedness individual in adulthood. And so I've always really prided myself on being self-sufficient. So I will always lean towards taking care of myself before I go out and seek the assistance of others if I know I can take care of it. And that comes from experience, and that comes from education, which is what this video is kind of meant to do. And so I pass that on to my daughter as well, and she's actually a veterinarian student, and so she's typically, she's actually technically an allopath herself, but she also knows that the number two other reason about protecting your gut microbiome. I mean, she's aware of it. I'm aware of it, and I want to mention this for those of you who aren't really attuned to what antibiotics, will do for you, and also do to you, and it's basically a shotgun blast to your gut microbiome, and your gut is where all of these beneficial symbiotic bacterium live within you that are part of your process for digestion and health, your immune system, and so forth. So there's this really important colony of stuff that lives inside of you that is critical for your health, and it's really it really is the backbone of your immune system. And when you take antibiotics, you destroy different cultures of bacterium that could take up to 2 years to recover from just one round of antibiotics, and you will have all sorts of issues from that. There's a lot of side effects, as any other pharmaceutical, that you are prescribed. Look at the back 3 pages of the document that comes with it, and it's nothing but side effects. And if you're someone like myself and also my daughter, you don't want to do that to yourself. It's kind of a drastic measure to take when you can do something else that won't destroy your gut microbiome. Then that's just the way that my family rolls. The third reason is you're me. I just described myself, and on top of everything I just said, I personally really don't like the entire quote modern medicine. They're called allopaths, and they've only been doing their thing for about 100 years. Whereas, when you look at the other traditional healing arts, Ayurvedic, Chinese traditional medicine, blah, 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 they've been around for thousands of years, and so I just don't trust it. That's my opinion, but I just don't. And I just think taking the path of using synthetic chemicals to try to, quote, improve your health, it's sort of it's just an oxymoron to me that would be the route anyone would take. But that is the DIY reason for, the way that I approach things, the way my family approaches it. So now when it comes to a, DIY wound healing, and this is from myself, my family, my process that I go through, it's a 4-point strategy. And I think that's something that everyone, honestly, you don't even find this in modern medicine. But, because typically the modern medicine is, and I've gotten dog bites, and they will basically do 1 and 2. And so they don't think about 3 and 4, but it's a 4-step process if you really, and I'm kind of good at it. I've been doing it for a couple of decades now, and I've gotten some serious accidents, and this dog bite situation is just one of those situations where my daughter, at this time, it was her time, her turn, to have an accident. But bottom line, though, is, they, if you go to the ER, they're going to flush the dog bite. One of the really bad things about dog bites, as opposed to getting cut, is that the dog's fangs will penetrate deep into your tissues, not just your skin, and all that bacteria will go deep into your muscle and into your flesh, and it's really hard. Once that bacteria gets in there, you're guaranteed going to have an infection. Her bite was significant. I'll show you pictures here in a second. And so, there's the issue here is you've got two avenues of infection you need to be concerned about with this type of a wound. And first of all, it's the topical. It's that very top layer of your dermis and your epidermal layer of your skin that's been broken. And you're definitely, you are guaranteed will get an infection. As much as you can flush the wound and everything like that, you're going to get an infection from a topical standpoint. Your skin turns red, bright red, inflammation, swelling, that sort of thing. And then the second thing, also because the bacteria has penetrated into your meat, then you're basically also going to get an internal infection, and you'll see this infection go up your arm, and then other people untreated, it turns into sepsis and so forth. And so it can get extremely dangerous. Infection literally is, if you study, like I'm a Civil War buff, and one of the biggest things during the Civil War, and more soldiers died from infections than they died from the actual wounds that they got. If you study that, and that's typical for all wounds of that nature. So infections are the worst part about wounds, and so the approach that I take on a DIY effort to heal a wound is to treat that topical one way and an internal another way. Also, to keep in mind that there's the concept of bioelectricity. We are electrical beings. Our processes, everything about our cells, through this thing called a potassium calcium ion exchange. We are we're literally electrical beings. We have a current that runs about, I think it's like 21 milliamps in our cells. That's our typical voltage. We, have electricity going through us, and our bodies, once that electricity is broken, because there's an opening in the body, then if that electricity doesn't flow correctly, then if you can establish that electricity, and you can basically put electricity back into the body, and to basically help that wound, then studies show that that it actually does help heal and improve wound healing, and also the nutrients. So we'll get into that more deeply. So right off the bat, on the topical infection part, this is what we did. Now, the initial flush, obviously, is you only want to do this once. It's hydrogen peroxide to basically get the majority of whatever contaminants made it into the wound. And so there's an initial flush of hydrogen peroxide to do that, which is essentially just blasting it with oxygen. And you don't really want to do that twice because it's damaging. It will eat up everything, And so you only do it once. It's not something you want to do, day 2, day 3. So there's that initial flush. And then what was interesting about this time, it was normally, when like I have a wound or something like that, then I will just treat it with C60 oil, which has wound healing properties. If you can go do that. There's studies on that already, as well as colloidal silver, which is an antibacterial, antimicrobial. And I use those two compounds, and that's usually good enough. I've also used ozonation on other wounds. There's another video in my series where I got bit by a spider. It was turned into a really bad abscess, and I used that as a case study for wound healing as well, where I was able to successfully ozonate and do blood electrification. But in this case, the first few days, I was telling her, try C60 and colloidal silver, and it wasn't really making making the effect that we were looking for in terms of just the watching the skin coloration as a determination for infection. So she switched to then using Betadine, which was the only like kind of medical supply that was used during this, in addition to the gauze and so forth. So she switched to a Betadine antiseptic, which is an iodine-based solution to basically disinfect the wound topically. And then for an ointment, instead of using antibiotic cream, she was using Manuka honey ointment. This is medical Manuka honey, and if you've studied honeys, there's this magical honey from Australia called Manuka. And I actually take it when, like, if I ever got a sore throat or anything like that, and she does as well. So these are the two products. Of course, there's links to everything I'm going to be talking about in the video description below. But these were the two things that did work. And so so I'm just saying that, when I think that just as now discovered with this case that we just did on her hand, we discovered that when it's really severe, just C60 oil and colloidal silver and ozonation, it's just not good enough, not strong enough. But Betadine worked wonderfully, as well as the Manuka honey ointment on the wound itself after it was disinfected. And doing that it just worked out perfectly. And you'll see in the pictures how well the wound healed. Now, in terms of bandaging, obviously one of the things about wounds is that they're going to seep. And you want to let them breathe, and so just a loose gauze bandage, and then change daily. In fact, I went, one time I had a dog bite, and same thing. I thought they were going to stitch me up, and they're like, no, we don't want to stitch you up because this thing needs to seep out. It's gonna just seep, and you need to let it seep. If you seal it up, you're going to trap all that inside of you, and you don't want to. That's going to make your infection worse. So that's kind of what did. She didn't get any stitches. Obviously, she never went to the doctor, and so basically just treating it from a topical. Treating it with Betadine and Manuka medical honey did really, really, really good job on the topical infection aspect of the wound. Now, the next thing, from an internal standpoint, this is where the doctors will just give you prescriptions of antibiotics, and you'll do a 10-day regimen, and of course all the side effects that come with that. And so to avoid that, the process that my family does is we all do the Bob Beck protocol. Now, I made an entire video, link below in the description, in the video description of that video. But a Bob Beck protocol is based on the the basic modality is blood electrification, and in the video it kind of describes the patents and the studies that created, the whole idea of doing it and all that stuff. So I covered that in the video. But the idea though is you want to basically use a device that will that sends a microcurrent through your bloodstream, which then basically mitigates and or neutralizes all of the pathogens in your bloods, viruses, bacteriums, molds, fungus, anything that's a pathogen. So it'll wipe out any type of infection that you have that's made it to your bloodstream. And so the Beck protocol is a combination of blood electrification and then ingesting colloidal silver, which is water, silver ions suspended in water, as well as water that has been ozonated, which gives it, basically you're taking in a big blast of oxygen in the water. You're drinking silver ions. Oxygen by itself is an incredible antimicrobial. Again, so colloidal silver is an antimicrobial, sorry, and then the blood electrification, basically banging away and mitigating all of those pathogens. So that combination of things is called the Bob Beck protocol. Again, watch the video. But doing that Bob Beck protocol, from the moment that she had a dog bite, she started the Bob Beck protocol and she did it for 7 days straight, and that prevented any internal infection whatsoever. So in place of antibiotics, this is what was done, so that she did not have to destroy her gut microbiome, and when she was done with wound healing, she's perfectly healthy and no side effects, and that's the whole key to this, right? So again, you want to hit it really hard with from the topical aspect of it, and you want to hit that infection really hard from internal, and this is how we did it. Now the next thing again about microcurrent, and this is a wound healing support processes, but I want to kind of point you to a study and just a sample of multiple different studies on the subject, link in the description below, but this study is specifically about home-based electrical stimulation to accelerate wound healing as a double-blind randomized control trial. So this is this is all real NIH level type of studies, but bottom line, here's a study that basically demonstrates that using a microcurrent device, and in this case this microcurrent device is called a Tenant biomodulator. I have one. I have all this stuff. I've been doing this for a couple decades. My daughter has all of everything. We both have these med kits with all these tools in it, and that allows us to be DIY, and I admit that you have to have that as well if you want to be DIY, but if you want to avoid allopaths, then you do need to prepare and have these things on hand, and they work. That's the key. They work, okay? And so bottom line though, this is an entire study. It's 10 pages long that kind of describes all of the different processes by which they used microcurrent to stimulate the body's ability to heal itself and to accelerate wound healing. So microcurrent as a treatment for wound healing to help your body heal itself and put your body into a healing state is proven, and it worked really, really well. And it was just, in other words, you've got to deal with the infection, but you also want to help the wound heal, right? So it's kind of a two-step process. So fighting off the infection, step one. Step two is help your body heal, and the number one way you can help your body heal is through microcurrent. Now the other way you can help your body heal is through nutrients, and here's another study, link below, where I also want to really caveat this concept here. It's kind of like when you've got a wound, your body has to create all of the tissues and regrow and regenerate all of the connective tissues, all of the blood vessels, and everything else that's been destroyed in the wound. It has to grow. It's not any different than a woman getting pregnant and being prescribed prenatal vitamins. And the whole idea here is, if you were to take a look at this study, where it basically demonstrates that the necessity and the importance of actually having nutritional support for connective tissue repair and wound healing, and it gets into the actual detail of what types of nutrition is critical for your body to replace all of the tissues that were damaged and to regenerate and regrow everything: collagen, glucosamine, glucuronic acids, amino acids, vitamin E, zinc, and copper, all of the different things that your body is going to pull out of your system to then grow all these new tissues, right? And I'll tell you what, if you are mineral deficient, if you are vitamin deficient, and you get a wound, you're screwed. screwed, because where's your body going to get all of these building materials to replace all that stuff that got damaged? And so one of the first things we did, obviously, we did a bunch of things real quick, but right off the bat was like, hey man, let's get this thing cleaned up, let's get it treated. Immediately started the Beck protocol. Another thing was between the Beck protocol, I was having her zap with the microcurrent device, the biomodulator, to stimulate the body's healing process while she was fighting off the infection, treating it topically. And lastly, though, I basically told her, hey, you need to double up on all these different supplements. And so, I brought a bunch to her as well. She had some, but basically making sure that she was doubling up, not just your daily vitamin. You need to double it, right? Because your body's going to need your quote daily, but then you need even more, right, to regenerate all these tissues. So, and then basically doubled up on these specific supplements so that she was aiding her body and giving her body the basic building blocks that she needed to replace all of those tissues. And so I want to show you what this was. This was the dog bite. This was she had multiple lacerations on the top of her hand that were superficial in nature. There's one big gash right here, but then this was the worst of it, was her pinky. It was just, you could see this incredible gash all the way down to the bone initially. This was like, I think, day 3 or something like that. We tried to take pictures as much as we could during this, but you can imagine, right? So the wound was was very deep, and it was pretty big gash. It wasn't just a cut. This was a gash. The dog did quite a number on her hand, and so this was in the early few days. After a few days of treatment, you can see where the wounds had started to patch together, and the coloration, which is really important here, instead of it turning red, it stayed just this nice flesh tone, which meant that we were on top of the infection from the topical standpoint. And the yellow colorations from the Betadine, by the way. And so basically the wound started to heal really well. This was about a week or so into it, and then another week or so after that, the healing continued to progress at a really great rate. And there was just a little bit of redness because she had to go to work and use her hands. And so as much as she tried not to, damage the wound itself, because you're trying to let it heal and don't want to disturb the scabbing, she did kind of disturb it. So it was getting a little red about 3 weeks in there, but she just kept up the same protocol as described. And so then about a month later, it really scabbed over really well. The top lacerations on the top of her hand had healed pretty well at that point. And so at this point, these gashes had become rather superficial. The deeper part had healed up and covered up. And most recently, then this was about 6 weeks into it, where you could see where this one wound had completely healed, and then the gash had pretty much completely sealed at that point. And then lastly, at 2 months, this is what her hand looks like. So just to kind of give you an example, she does now, I mean, this is permanent, a little bit of a scar right there, a couple of scars on the top of her hand, and then right here you could see where the gash was, and it took out all this skin. And this is the part, all of this had to be regrown. And so that kind of really exemplifies the concept here that you're going to have to create new tissue, and the need for for building, for the nutrient building blocks. But just to also point out too, it was kind of difficult because the wound location. So just in using the microcurrent device, I basically was saying, hey, put the probe here and here, so she was then probing at the tip of her finger as well to draw blood flow into the finger, as well as putting the microcurrent device here, and we call it zapping, but it's just basically you're putting the probe up there and letting the microcurrent send current into the wound area. And so she did that. I believe it was like about, I was telling her, like, do it 15 minutes a day of the microcurrent, and change the bandage daily. And she was on board with this. Very smart girl. But you can see where the wound had healed perfectly. I mean, there's going to be a scar no matter what, and even if you stitch it up, you'd still have a scar. So bottom line, at the end of the day, this is a do-it-yourself wound healing without the necessity to destroy your gut microbiome and have side effects weeks into months later because of what you've done to your digestive system. And basically the idea of that it is 100% possible to be your own healer. And to support yourself. And if you're someone like a mariner and you're out on a boat, or you're a hunter or camper, and there's just no doctor around, Having a blood electrification just a little box. It's this little tiny thing to carry with you. And a couple of these, betadine and manuka honey, but just having some supplies, like whenever I go and I'm not anywhere near civilization, I have this. I have a little kit and I carry this stuff around because you never know what's going to happen. So that's the other point too. Even if you're not, opposed to allopaths, you still should be prepared. You never know what could happen. But anyway, this video, I'm trying to keep it as short as possible. I just wanted to share with you the story and the way that we did it and how we did it and the success of it as a demonstration that you can completely heal thyself. Doctor thyself, be your own healer, and you don't need chemicals and synthetic chemicals to do so. You can treat yourself and come out perfectly fine. You just need the confidence to do so, and you need to be prepared. So that's it. Thanks for watching. This is a video that I'll be continuing in a series where I want to really focus in on health and healing, and this really is kind of the video that's going to kick that off. So thank you for watching. This is the Tinker's Academy, a tinker for your health, and if you can find a link to my blog below if you want to reach me, and just want to say, hey, thanks for watching the video. Appreciate your time. Hope this was educational, and have a great day. Aloha.